Hello, I'm Foulplay Gaming and welcome to another Achroma video. Today's video we're having a look at another tier list. So if you didn't catch the other videos, there'll be a link in the top or a link in description where we've already had a look at the first two realms, the Curse of Curdle Hill and Siege of Draco Temple. And now we're looking at the third realm, which is Fall of Flutterby. So the reason for these tier lists, if you haven't watched the previous videos, is for those that are looking to start to deck build, it is important when deck building to not only understand which cards have strong synergy together, but also just have an idea of which cards are absolute go-tos. You know, if you're trying to build the best deck possible, which cards you really want to try and get into your deck, and other ones which really don't give you that much value. Firstly, as a bit of a disclaimer, this is clearly my own opinion. I've had Fall of Flutterby since it was pre-released. And I've played a lot of games of Flutterby. I've made some custom decks, played countless games of them, against them and with them, played cross-realm, played just in the realm. So I feel like I have a decent understanding now of how most cards work and which cards really have got me best value and not. So before we get started, the tier list, let me just explain how each of the tiers work. Now, this is quite difficult to do, because as some people have pointed out in previous videos, it's really hard to really compare, for example, the legendaries to commons, because you might see, I might put King Craven, for example, I might put Copper Joss in C tier, but then put, Toadstool Cannon up in A tier, and you're like, well, how on earth do you justify a common being more than a legendary? But just to be really clear, when I actually go through these, I'm kind of doing it on a rarity basis. So I'm kind of comparing all the legendaries, then comparing all the rares, then all the uncommons, then all the commons. But to save time and energy and doing like 5 different videos, I'm doing it all in one video. So just keep in mind that if you ever see me put like a common above a legendary, I'm not necessarily saying that the common is better than legendary, but I'm just meaning the overall value of the card is better. Because that's how, for the most part, I judge these cards for these tier lists. I look at what is the value you're getting out of them. Now, the way the tiers work is if I put something in S tier, I am basically saying that if you can get this card in your deck, you should. You would be silly not to put it in your deck. It's too good to not deck build it if you're building something good. A tier are cards that are very, very good by themselves, meaning they are really good and you don't have to worry about synergies. You can draw that card and get great value out of that card without having to rely on drawing other cards. B tier cards are cards that are good cards, but they have to rely on maybe 1 or 2 other cards being in place to actually get value out of it. So, they're good cards, but they need something else to help them. C cards, kind of your standard tier. They're not amazing, they're not terrible, they just do a simple job. D tier is kind of the opposite of kind of a mixture of A and B. D tier are cards that not only are they, they're just not great, basically. Cards that they don't really get much value out of them. And F tier, which I should probably change that to grey, is cards that are so bad that not only are they just not great in general, but they only work if you actually combine it with something else. So not only is it not a great card, but you also have to wait to actually deal it with something else. Now, hopefully I don't put many cards in F tier, because I like to think that, Realm Runner Studios have done a really good job with this particular realm. So hopefully there won't be too many in the F tier. This is all improvised. I haven't prepared what I want to do in each tier. We're just going to talk through each card briefly and then get straight into it. Okay, so starting the tier list then is the promo card. So unfortunately, I can't bring this one large on screen like I can with the other cards, but for those that haven't seen, all of the promo cards have the same value no matter which realm you get. So Fall of Flutterby's promo card, it's cost 4 and it's a steal 2. Purely for consistency, I'm going to be putting Fall of Flutterby promo card in the A tier. That's the same place I put the Curdle Hill and Draco Temple one. The reason for it is by itself, standalone, it is a good card. It costs only 4 and it is a steal 2. So whether you are playing a drain steal deck or whether you're doing a gain deck up to 30, this is going to benefit you. The fact it's a location means that it's hard to get rid of. And the fact it costs 4 and steals 2 means that in only 2 turns it will have paid for itself, and more than 2 turns it will pay itself in dividends. So A tier for the promo card. So starting with the legendaries then, we're starting with Copper Joss, which is a +3 in the resolve. She costs 4, she gets a splat 3, and she can't be attacked. I think plain and simple, she has to be S tier, especially when we compare it to some of the other legendaries out here. The fact that she costs 4, and in the first turn that you play her, provided you have another card on the board, which does kind of make her slightly A tier, but provided you have another card on the board, just one location or one other character, Copper Joss can splat 3. So that means if you do have another card out, you're gaining 6 Chroma shards back in one turn. So she's actually paying for herself and 2 extra in one turn. On top of that, the fact that she can't be attacked means that she is essentially invulnerable apart from actions, which, okay, there are plenty of actions that can get rid of characters, but it still means that a player couldn't just put down their legendary or a decent character in a object and just kill her. You have to actually have an, you have to have an action to destroy it. It's just so powerful. She is S tier. If you're going for a gain deck, you absolutely want to go for her without a shadow of doubt. So next then is Cornelius Hugh. So he is a cost 6. He's +2. He's a splat 1. And his ability is you choose 2 of the Chroma shards, one of each color, and then the shard value of cards in these hands will be reduced for the chosen shards. Now, this is the first barrier that I've hit for this tier list, because compared to the other realms, what's difficult to manage about this tier list in this realm is this realm has a lot of really strong synergies. So if you, for example, did a deck build that was all around the types of cards which reduce cost, you could have a deck where essentially you can play cards for free. But the thing that I don't like about this, which is actually, I'm actually going to put him down to, let's think, I'm thinking either B or C tier. I'm personally going to say, you know what, I'm going to say, I'm going to say B tier. I'm really hesitant. I'm kind of tempted to put him C tier. I might change that. But the reason why is 6 is quite a heavy cost. He's only going to be getting back 3 per turn, and that's if you have another character or location on the board. So it's going to take 2 whole turns to pay back. On top of that, I don't think his ability is that good. Choosing 2 colors and makes things cheaper, sure, that's going to make things cheaper for you, but that also makes things cheaper for your opponent. Now, if you know that you're going to be playing against an Achroma deck, then okay, that could be quite good, because if you're playing against an Achroma deck, they're mostly going to have Achroma shards, so this is going to be benefiting you only. But, you know, a lot of people play cross-realm. A lot of people mix their decks up. So chances are, and, you know, you might be in a more than 2-player game, he's too situational. You know, I'm putting him down to C. I'm changing him to C. I just feel like his main ability, which is that choose 2 colors thing, it helps other people just as much as it helps you, so it's not really an advantage, and he's very costly. You don't get much in return. I'm putting him in C tier. Next is Guardians of Flutterby Falls. This, for me personally, is another legendary that goes to S tier. Definitely going to be a tough choice between them and Copper Joss. So Guardians of Flutterby Falls, it is a location. It gives you block 4, which is obviously fantastic against many decks that will have steel. It costs 6 to play, which is quite expensive, but you can splat 4. So not only is it a block 4, but provided you have another location out, or character, it actually gives you 4. So you're in 2 turns, it's paid for itself and more. So it only takes really 1.5 turns, you could argue, to get itself back. And look at its other ability. Once per turn, defend another character as if this card has a strength of 6. So what's really powerful about that is having a location is already very strong, because locations are statistically more difficult to get rid of than characters. So getting a good location out is always going to be strong for you. But the fact that it's kind of like a silent character, because it can't be attacked itself, but you can use it to defend other characters. So you get that location out, and then you can play loads of other characters, and then use this once per turn to defend them. It's just super strong. So the fact that it's giving you +4 every turn, also 4 block, and it's kind of like a hidden character, it's S tier. It's so strong. You can build it into pretty much any build, Achroma or Chroma, and it's going to be beneficial to you. So next then is King Craven. So he is the first of the Achroma legendaries in this realm. He costs 6. He is a -2, and his ability is really interesting. Cards cannot gain or steal in the resolve step. Now, this is obviously very strong, because if you have him out and can keep him out, then you are going to essentially completely stop your opponents from being able to gain shards. The only way they'd be able to gain shards is through splatting, because there's nothing about stopping splat. But that's still going to make it very, very difficult. So the way King Craven would work is you would get him out on your canvas, and although that does mean that you can't gain either, you have some steal on, you have some minus on the board. If you have him and a few others out, you can essentially, in a couple of turns, even though you will also be struggling to have shards, you can drain your opponents to victory in a couple of turns, and they obviously won't be able to play anything else. So I am also going to be putting him into S tier, because for what he does, that is amazing. Obviously, he's not going to gain you any shards because of his power, but for what he does, that is incredibly strong. You could argue that he completely counters the other two. So next then is Spiral Traitorius. Spiral is the other Achroma legendary, and he is a good card. So he costs 5, which is a bit cheaper, and his ability is he simply gets to steal based on the number of pixies and fairies on your canvas. I'm personally going to put him into B tier. He is a good legendary. Again, B tier is good, but it heavily relies on you actually having a number of fairies and pixies out. You'll notice as we go through this list, a lot of the fairies and pixies can often be quite low health, meaning they are hard to keep out and not die. You know, realistically, you know, you need to have at least, you know, 2 or 3 pixie fairies out to start making Spiral worth it, and that might be quite hard to get out. So yeah, B tier, good card, but he relies on others. And then the last legendary is Sprat Morail. So he is a very interesting one as well. So he's a steal 2. He gets a splat 1. So you could argue that he almost pays for himself back on 1 turn, but then on the second turn will pay extra. During your end step, you may both draw and trade. Now, I'm personally going to put him in. Oh, it's tempting. I'm thinking A tier. Yeah, I'm going to go A tier. He is quite good because, you know, again, he's going to steal. You're going to, you know, he practically pays for himself. The fact that you can draw and trade at the end is just going to help you with getting extra shards as well. But the reason why I've not put him into S tier is the thing I don't like about him is he's too weak. The fact that he's only 4 shards means there are far too many of the other characters in this realm, mostly rares, admittedly, that can quite easily either single targeted or double up and kill Sprat. So it's not going to be difficult for your opponent to get rid of Sprats. Unlike Copper Joss, you know, Copper Joss is only cost 4, but she can't be attacked, so that's completely different. So that's why I'm going to put him in A tier. In fact, no, I will still put him in A tier. I will still put him in A tier. I'm tempted to go B tier, but I'll go A. And there we go. That's the legendaries. Let me know in the comments or in Discord what you think if I got that completely wrong. But that's what I think about the legendaries. But now let's move on to the rares. As a reminder, we're mostly comparing rares to rares, but you can take a pinch of salt from them compared to the legendaries. So the first rare we're going to look at is Achroma Corruptor. So Achroma Corruptor, it costs 2. It is a -1 in the resolve, and when this character attacks, erase a character or location. This personally for me goes into S tier. There aren't that many objects actually in this realm. You'll see later there's only really, I mean, how many are there? 1, 2, 3. Unless I'm just counting this really quickly, I might miscount. Yeah, there's only 5 objects of power actually in this realm, and 2 of them are rares. And for that, Achroma Corruptor is super powerful. It's cheap to play, but its ability is the same as Ignis from Siege of Draco Temple. When attached character attacks, erase a character or location. For those who don't understand the significance of that ability happens when you choose to attack, but not actually, it happens before the attack goes off. So what this means is you could use Achroma Corruptor, you could use Achroma Corruptor on something as simple as the Imp, who only has 1 health, to attack, for example, King Craven, and when it attacks, you may erase a character or location. So you could use an Imp, which only costs 1, with the Achroma Corruptor of 2, even though that's only a total of 3 attack value against King Craven's 6. Achroma Corruptor's ability goes off before the attack happens, meaning you could kill King Craven with Achroma Corruptor attached to anybody. It makes it an invaluable tool. You can literally attack and destroy any character for free. Its only weakness is the fact that because it only costs 2, on the next opponent's turn, they could use any character with 2 and kind of suicide that character into the Achroma Corruptor to get rid of it. But even still, if you can control the board, that could become lethal. It's so good. The next rare we're going to talk about is Cocoon Lantern. This is a location, which is +2 in the resolve. It costs 4, but once per turn, when a character is erased from your canvas, gain the erased character's shards. This I'm going to put into B tier. I really like it. Very strong card. It pays for itself in 2 turns and can give you some really good shard back. But the reason I don't like this, the reason it's in B tier is it's very dependent on, 1, you actually having characters on the board, and 2, it relies on your characters then dying. And it's only once per turn as well. So if someone wipes your board in 1 turn, you're only going to get 1 value from it. On top of that, it's kind of setting you up to fail. Like you don't really want your characters to die. It's kind of like it's a fail safe, but you don't really want to plan your deck to die. So it's a nice card, but it relies too much on others. The next rare is Double Trouble, and for those that have used Double Trouble, you know exactly where this is going. It's going straight into that S tier as well. It is essentially like Mirror Sanctum from Draco Temple. For those that haven't seen it before, it's an action, it costs 3, and once deployed, this card becomes a copy of a character on any canvas, gaining all of its abilities. Now, this is currently an S tier. I'm recording this on the 20th of September 2022, and as it currently stands in the Achroma rules, you can... So, for those who don't know, you cannot actually play 2 of the same heroic character. For example, if you look at King Craven, at the top of King Craven, it says that he is a heroic character. Now, obviously, you couldn't have 2 King Cravens in your deck because, he's legendary. But let's just say, for example, let's say you had a character that was a rare heroic. For example, I'm pretty certain... an uncommon. If I bring up Camilla, for example. So Camilla Traitorius is a good example of this. She is a uncommon character. So you could technically have 2 of her in your deck. But she's a heroic character, meaning you can't have 2 of her on your canvas at the same time. Now, going back to Double Trouble is a bit of a loophole around that, because Double Trouble becomes a copy of a character, gaining all of its abilities, but it doesn't actually become the character itself. So as it's currently written in the rules, you could use Double Trouble, and you could technically have 2 Copper Josses, which has been done, and is incredibly strong, in fact, broken. A lot of people agree that both Double Trouble, being able to copy heroic characters, as well as going back to Siege of Draco Temple, Mirror Sanctum being able to copy heroic locations is far too strong. But at the time that I'm recording this, that is still currently how it's allowed to happen, so therefore it is definitely in the S tier. Keep in mind that you can also copy an opponent's legendary, so your opponent could have Copper Joss, and you could now have your own Copper Joss and a Guardians of Low Falls. Be aware that I believe the devs are looking at potentially changing the wording of the rules. I think they're going to be changing at some point, and this is me speculating, by the way. This is not inside information, it's just me speculating. I reckon they're probably going to change it to say that cards that become copies of cards cannot, you basically, the rule is going to say you cannot have more than 1 of the same heroic character or location on your canvas. This includes copies, basically. It's, again, speculation. So it's currently in S tier. It might move down to A tier whenever that rules change, but right now, it's still S tier. Next then is Dovetail. Dovetail is a 4-cost card, steal 2, and splat 1. When you actually look at it, Dovetail is exactly the same as Sprat Morail, except Sprat Morail includes the during your end steps you can draw a trade. She's literally exactly the same as him, just minus the being able to draw and trade at the same time. So for that reason, I'm going to put her in A tier, because the fact that she steals 2 and splat 1 means that she almost pays for herself in 1 turn. The next turn it will pay for itself and even more, and it's just a solid character. I'm quite happy putting her in A tier. Next is Infiltration. So this is kind of like a small version of what King Craven's ability is. So it's an action, it costs 4. Cards on other canvases cannot gain, steal, and splat until your next turn. Now notice this one does include the word splat. So where King Craven is a permanent version, but it does allow splat, Infiltration means you cannot splat at all. Personally, I'm going to put this one down in C tier. The reason for that is because although although it is a powerful card, it can potentially stop your opponent from being able to win on the next turn. It might also be, if you play it at the right time, where you maybe have let's say they had 8 health let's say they had 8 shards, you are about to minus 4 shards from them, so you could minus 4 shards in your resolve phase, then play infiltration, which means that on the next turn you're almost guaranteed to kill them. So there is definitely ways you can use it. The reason I'm putting it in C tier though is it's very situational. You have to be in a situation where one turn will actually make the difference. And secondly, as most of you that have played this game long enough will know, in Achroma decks, you quite often don't have that many shards. Most of the time, you're starting your turn on as little as 4 to 6 shards. The chances of you actually having, being in a position where you can actually play infiltration is probably quite slim. So for that reason, I'm putting in C tier. It's not terrible, but in my opinion, it's not the greatest. Next is Mrs. Potts. She costs 3, she's a +2, and once per turn, you can dig for a fairy character. I'm going to put her in B tier. Quite simply, she's a good card, but she is reliant on the fact that once per turn, you can dig for a fairy character. Actually, yeah, though, you know what? No, I'm putting in B tier because she's situational, that you actually have a fairy character you want to retrieve. Obviously, put her into a build with, Copper Joss where you could then get her back out, that's fine. But, it's very situational about she's only really useful if you've already got fairies dead. If you get Mrs. Potts in your opening hand, you don't really want to play her early because she'll get destroyed before you have a chance to use her. And likewise, you don't want to just keep her in your hand forever. So, yeah, she's good, but she's quite reliant on a few things happening first. Next is Pixie Prison. This is a location. It costs 3, it's a +2. As an action, you can raise a character or raise all Pixie characters. For me personally, this is A tier. And the reason why, I found in my experience of Achroma, the most powerful type of card is a card that has board control. If a card has abilities that allow you to erase characters, erase locations, restrain characters, things like that, that is really strong. The fact that this only costs 3, it almost pays for itself in one turn and will definitely pay itself by a second turn. The fact that you can erase any character, or if you do happen to be playing against a pixie deck, all of the pixie characters, obviously that doesn't include your own, so you've got to be careful that you don't build a deck with pixies in it. That's incredibly powerful. Even just erasing one character for 3 cost. Take in some of the other realms, even a card by itself, an action that would just erase a character or location would cost 3. The fact this also gives you resolve is incredible. A tier, absolutely. Next is one of our other objects of powers, Prism Sprayer. So Prism Sprayer is a 4-cost card, +2 in the resolve. When this card is erased, you may attach it to another character or on your canvas. It is one of the strongest objects of powers in this realm. And I can see it being a good card. It pays for itself in 2 turns, but I'm still going to put it down in B tier. The reason why is its main benefit is that of you need to have multiple characters on the board. If you play Prism Sprayer when you only have 1 character on the board, you are risking it being destroyed. If you can, once you have multiple characters out, you could essentially keep it out forever. But yeah, it's unfortunately, it's a bit situational, takes a bit of setup to do, so it's good, but it's going to beat it. The next rare is Serrano. So this is a 4-cost Achroma card. It is Steel 2, so it'll pay itself back in 2 turns. And as an action, you can choose one. Either each player must erase a character, or each other player must erase a location. I'm going to put this one down in C tier. And the reason why is I like the ability. I know that I literally mentioned a few moments ago that, cards that have control is really good. And I know I've kind of just contradicted myself there. But the reason why I'm putting him in C tier is he's quite, again, considering that you're more likely than not going to build him in an Achroma deck, he is quite expensive. He takes a couple of turns to pay himself back, which isn't ideal. I prefer characters that pay themselves back in 1 turn or 2 turns to give you more back. But on top of that, even though this, it's very situational, he works best in multiplayer games. So in a 2-player game, he's not going to be that powerful, whereas in a 3 to 6-player game, of course, he would be higher up the tier. But you know what, I'll put him in B tier for that reason. He's good, but situational. Yeah, I think we can agree on that. He's good, but he's situational. He's fantastic in a 3 or more player game, in a 2-player game. And the reason why it's not ideal as well is the other player gets to choose which card they erase. So if your opponent only has one card out and it's their legendary, then great, you're going to get loads of value. But if they've got some throwaway cards, like a couple of Imps or Funguars or Dracons or something like that, then you're not really doing much damage. So yeah, for that reason, he's a good card, but yeah, situational. I'm really tempted to go C tier, but I feel like people are screaming at the screen for this, so I'll go B tier. We're almost there with the rares. The next one is Splat Square. This is a 5-cost location. It gives you 3 back in the resolve. All characters on your canvas get Splat 1. As an action, you get to draw a card. I'm personally putting this in A tier. I'm really tempted to go up to S tier. Oh, it's tempting. Yeah, you know what? I am going to go S tier. Yeah, I am going to do it. And here's why. Firstly, let's look at the cost. It costs 5, but you'll definitely get 3 back. You only have to have 2 characters out to be able to get 5 back. But even if you have 0 characters out, it will pay for itself and +1 in 2 turns. So it pays for more than itself in 2 turns. And on top of that, you're still getting to draw a card as well. And card draw is very, very important in this game. And the likelihood is you're going to play this when you have another character out, which will straight away then start paying for itself and more. It has so much snowball potential. It's a really great location. And because it says characters, it doesn't specify pixies or fairies. It doesn't matter what deck you build in this realm. There are loads of characters. It doesn't even specify like it has to be a humanoid. Even creatures will work. So it's so easy to fill your board with characters. You know, if you had 5 really cheap characters out, you're suddenly getting Splat 5. That's now a card worth 8. That's insane. Then we got Throne Room, which is a 5-cost Achroma card with Steel 2. You get to choose 1 colored Chroma, and cards on any canvas with that color cannot gain, steal, or splat. And as an action, you can draw a card. It's not too dissimilar from Splat Square in terms of how much value you get. However, I'm going to pop it in A tier rather than S tier, mainly because it's going to take a while to pay for itself. It costs 5, and it's a Steel 2, so it's going to take 3 turns to pay itself back, which in a Achroma deck is going to hurt. That is going to... You really need to try and get Throne Room out early. But it's A tier because it is still a very good card. The fact it gives you... You can choose 1 Chroma color and say... You can't, that card cannot gain, steal, or splat. For example, if you put that onto Splat Square or Guardians of Flutterby Falls, you're going to then really negate that other person's gain. And the fact you draw a card as well is just a bonus. So, yeah, it's definitely A tier, but just off S tier in my opinion. And then the last rare, is Wincy Rustweather. He costs 3. He is a +1. And he gets Splat X. And Splat X is for each other character and location on your canvas, and draw a card. I am going to put him also straight up into the S tier. He is invaluable. 3 cost is quite cheap. Obviously, he only gives you +1 himself, but you get to splat for each other character and location on your canvas. Now, I appreciate this. Again, some of you might be shouting at the screen saying, well, Charlie, wasn't your rationale that it should be in B tier because it relies on other cards? It doesn't necessarily rely on other cards to work. It's just that more cards make it stronger. By himself, 3 cost, get 1 back, draw a card. That kind of makes him sort of B to A tier. But the fact that for every character and location on your canvas, which, you know, let's be honest, in an average game, you're probably going to have at least 2 or 3 cards out already, means that even by just having 2 cards out, he's paid for himself. Have 3 cards out and you're getting profit. Get him out when you've got 4 or 5 cards and you're going to snowball very quickly. Very powerful, S tier in my opinion. So that is all of the rares done. Again, let me know in the comments or in the Achroma Discord if you feel like I've done any cards dirty, or if you feel like there's any cards that really shouldn't be as high as they are. But now we're going to move on to the uncommons. So actions. The first one is Advanced Scouting Party. It costs 5, draw 3 cards, and then trade 1 of them. Personally, I think this is C tier. I like drawing cards, but the thing I don't like about it is 5 cost is really expensive. I don't like cards that have I appreciate some people might like them, but I don't like cards of a gamble, and I think personally that's too much of a risk, and therefore it's C tier. It's not brilliant, it's not terrible, it is what it is. Next, it's Flutterby. Cost 2. Choose one location and one character. They cannot gain, drain, steal, or prevent until the start of your next turn. I'm going to put this in B tier. It's a solid action. It's a good way of preventing your enemies from having a turn that could win. The only reason it's in B tier is because it relies on your other opponent actually having a location and a character. If they only have a location, or if they only have characters, you're not going to get as much value. So you're relying on them having both characters and locations. The next one is Giant Prism. Giant Prism, it costs 5. You get to erase all characters with any Achroma, and you gain +2 for each shard erased this way. I'm going to put this in B tier, and it hurts me. I want to go higher. Actually, no, you know what? I'm putting it in A tier. I'm putting it in A tier. The reason I'm moving up is because, again, going back to what I said earlier, having cards with the ability to erase characters is strong. The fact that Giant Prism has the potential snowball effect of being able to wipe, especially in a 3 or 4 player game, wipe literally tens. Not only could this, it's going in A tier, because not only could it wipe potentially, tens of characters off the board if you're playing a 6-player game, but that could also win you the game. Theoretically, let's say you were on 10 shards, you spend 5 to play this. If you were able to get rid of like 12 or 13 characters, I know that is asking a lot, but in a 6-player game, everyone having 2 characters out that are Achroma, it's not impossible. You could potentially win the game with this. And if you were on 20 shards already, you would need even less. So, in fact, it could be a win mechanic. I'm actually going to put an A tier. Next is Role Reversal. Swap a character from your canvas with another character on another canvas. Again, absolute A tier action. The fact that you could basically play a really cheap character like a Daydrifter, and then in the same turn play Role Reversal and steal your enemy's Copper Joss or King Craven or Sprat is just incredible. Role Reversal is a fantastic card. But you know what? S tier. It's S tier. It's control. I'm very pleased with that card. Next is Skynet. Cost 3 Achroma. Erase any character with any of those Achroma shards. I'm going to put that in A tier. Because, again, I like cards that have any form of erase. 3 isn't that expensive. Actually, no, I'm going to put it down into B tier, and here's why. Because can I justify Skynet being on par with Pixie Prison, considering Pixie Prison is to erase any character and is also resolved? So I'm going to put it down in B tier, actually, for that reason. It is good that it erases a character, but it doesn't do anything else for you, and it does cost 3. And you could only erase a character that has colored chroma shards. You can't erase an Achroma, in case you're doing Achroma versus Achroma. And then lastly, for the uncommon actions, is Split Decision. Draw 2 cards. This costs you 4, by the way. Draw 2 cards, deploy one of them for free, and discard the other. Again, I'm personally going to put this one down in D tier. But no, I'm going to go F. I'm going to make it my first F, and here's why. The fact that it costs 4, you draw 2 cards. Look at all these cards out here. Most cards cost 3 or less. You do have, you could, if you're lucky, draw a legendary or a rare. Absolutely, you could get some good value. It's a bit of a gamble. But if you look at actually odds on, the higher number of cards in your deck are going to be less than 4 shards. So you're spending 4 shards to play one card that costs less to play if you don't just wait one more turn to draw it. And the other card you must discard. So it's not even like you get to trade the other card and get shards back. So you're spending potentially, what if you did that? The chances are you're going to get 2 weak cards. You're spending 4 shards to play a card that is cheaper than 4 shards and discard something else that maybe you didn't want to discard. Now, in my opinion, it's F tier. You'll never see me put that in a build. Gambling, it could. I'm sure it could play off some fun situations where you suddenly get to play your King Craven for only 4 shards and throw away a Chroma Worm, but too situational. It's going down to F. So now for the uncommon characters. Firstly, we have Carmela Tratorius. She costs 2. She's a -1. As an action, you can erase a location or an object of power. Now, one thing I want to mention about Fall of Flutterby, and you'll notice I'm putting her in the S tier, by the way. The thing about Fall of Flutterby is there are not very many cards in this realm that allow you to erase locations, especially in the Chroma cards. There are quite a few Achroma cards that allow you to erase locations. For example, Achroma Corruptor, Carmilla, as we just said. And I think that actually might be it so far. As we go through, you'll notice that there are actually very, very, very limited cards in this realm that allow you to erase a location. So therefore, any cards that do allow you to erase a location are important. Carmilla costs 2 and you can erase a location. That is powerful. You need her in your deck. Next is Fire Tender, costs 3, +1. Action, you get to find a card in your deck with a red Chroma shard with a value of 3 or less. I'm going to put him in B because I like cards that allow you to card draw. The fact you can actually go through and find the card you want is really powerful. And when you actually look at it, there are quite a lot of cards in this realm that cost 3 or less that has a red Chroma shard that could be really useful for you to dig out, like Defensive Position, like Full Palette, get an object like Ballistics, get something like Lava Fountain out, and even Double Trouble. You could even get Double Trouble out. Now, you don't get to play it for free. You still have to spend money. So that's why I'm putting it in B tier, because it does rely on you actually, 1, having a card in your deck that you can actually now get, and 2, is it actually worth it? Because himself as an actual character, it takes 3 turns to pay himself back. It's not ideal. So I like the fact you can look for cards, but otherwise he's a bit meh. Next is Imp. Costs 1, is a -1 on the resolve, action, draw a card. I'm actually going to put him up into A tier, because card draw is really important, and a quick little -1, you know, he costs so little. 1 shard to -1 from your opponent this turn. Even if Imp gets destroyed in 1 turn, you've still done damage to your opponent and gotten to draw a card. So, yeah, I like him. Matron is next. 4 cost. She's a +2. The shard value of cards whilst in your player's hand is reduced by the light blue color. Now, I mentioned earlier with Dr. Cornelius Hugh that I can see the value in cards that do this. If you literally build a deck that is around making things cheaper, that one deck might actually be quite good, but only really against Achroma decks. Against any other deck that has also Chroma shards, you're just going to be making it easy for the other player to spend as well. So for that reason, it might get a bit of dislike in the comments. Pretty much any card that has the whole reduces the cost, I'm going to be putting in C tier. I appreciate that there is extra things to think about. Like, what if you're doing a 2v2 game? You could make things cheaper for your colleagues too. Completely get there are some fun things you can do with it. But talking from a strictly deck building point of view, it's not. I can't see it being the strongest of decks to build, because you are, for the most part, helping your opponents as much as you're helping you. I apologize if people don't like that opinion, but it's just what it is for me. Next is Morag. She is a 3-cost card. She steals 1, squish 1. I'm going to put her in C tier. She's relatively alright. You know, she pays for herself in 3 turns, and each turn you get to, you know, provided you have another character on your board. You know what? No, I'm going to put it down in D tier, actually. I'm going to put my first D tier. The reason why is not only is she not great because she takes 3 turns to pay for herself, but you know, the squish is only a 1 squish, and it's only if you have another character or location on the board. So it's very subjective. Not the most powerful characters. Upper and D tier. Sorry, Morag. Next is School Librarian. Cost 2. Resolve tab. Resolve is nothing, and the shard value of cards in your player's hand is reduced by green. I'm putting her in F tier. You know, she was already going in C tier in my opinion because of the whole, you know, like I said, I'm not a massive fan of the reduction of cards. But the fact that she costs 2, which means she's not exactly the most helpful character. She's quite weak. I mean, she's an old lady. I can't really complain. But the fact she gets nothing in the resolve phase. Literally nothing. Not even a +1. F tier. I would not put her in the deck. Next is Senior Painter. Costs 3, +1. And you can splat 1 other card. I'm going to put her in... She's quite similar to some of the other cards I've looked at. I think I'll put her in C tier. She's not great. She's not terrible. You know, she pays for herself in a couple of turns. If you keep her out for a while, she can splat. She can synergize quite nicely with some of the other painters. Yeah, she's not terrible, but I wouldn't say she's good. Like good enough. Yeah, she's C tier. C tier. Next is Splat Teacher. Costs 3. In the resolve is 1. And the shard value of cards are reduced by yellow, so you know exactly where I'm going with this one. I am thinking C tier, but actually I'm going to go D tier of this one. At least with Matron and Cornelius Hugh, who are in the C tier, at least they pay for themselves in 2 turns or less. Splat Teacher takes 3 turns to pay for himself. Now, I, again, respect the fact that he makes everyone else cheaper, but he does it for everybody, so D tier. Next is Squad Leader. Costs 4, 2 in the Resolve, and Splat X for each other painter on your canvas. I'm going to put her into B tier because she paid for herself in a couple of turns and she has very good potential to be even better. If you are running a mostly painter canvas and can get even a couple of painters out at the same time you play her, then obviously she is going to pay for herself and then some. And a 4-cost character, as you can see in this realm, is quite high. Most characters in this realm are 3 or less, so that is a nice, strong character. She can definitely go in B tier. That brings me on to the uncommon locations. So the first one is Castle Gates. It is a 3-cost Achroma, -2 in the Resolve, and as an action, you can dig for a Pixie. I'm not a really big fan of this one. I'm putting it in D tier. And the reason why is there's so many things. Well, there's actually quite a few things I don't like about this. Firstly, I repeat myself as earlier. When you have an Achroma deck, you more likely than not are struggling for shards. Therefore, paying 4 shards to be able to dig a Pixie out is very expensive. Now, yes, one could argue that you could dig for a Pixie and get out, for example, one of your legendaries like Spiral or King Craven. You could get out Serrano. You could get out Carmilla. There are quite a few strong Pixies you could dig for. But this is what I don't like. It's a once-off action, which means if you get Castle, you have to actually wait for one of your good Pixies to be played and die before you can play Castle Gates. So not only have you got to wait to have a good card in your hand, you've then got to play it, then wait for it to die, then play Castle Gates. And that's only if you have 4 shards that you can spare. And you don't even get to play that Pixie for free. You then have to still spend, another 6 or 5 or 4 shards to then play that Pixie. No, in my opinion, it's just too expensive. That really should be either you may dig for a Pixie every turn for that cost, or it should be like a 2 or 3 cost. For that reason, putting it in D tier. Blueprint Swirl. Oh, Blueprint Swirl. Whew, if I could have an S+ tier, it would go up there. This card, folks, should 110% be in your deck, no matter what deck you are building. It is a heroic location, meaning you can't have 2 of them out on the board at the same time, but because it is a uncommon, you can have 2 of them in your deck. I would recommend putting 2 of them in your deck. Let's talk through it. It costs 2, and it's a location, which makes it relatively hard to get rid of. As we've spoken about, there aren't that many cards in this realm that can get rid of locations. And its ability is you gain 1 extra. You get +1 in the Resolve for each of the colors present on your board. So it's kind of like a bingo board. So for each of the 1 color shards you have present, you gain an extra plus. Now, remember, that includes itself. So the fact that by playing it, you've got a light blue and a dark blue shard out means that even if Blueprint Swirl is the only card on your canvas, you are already getting +2. So it pays for itself in 1 turn. Now, that's just if it's by itself. So already, just by playing it by itself, it'll pay itself back. But it's not very difficult to actually, even just by having 1 or 2 other cards out that have a few, a variety of colors, this card can quickly become a +4, +5, or even a +6 in the Resolve. Theoretically, if you play this at the right time, this could instantly become a +6 card, giving you 4 extra shards from 1 turn. If you pair this with some of the cards in this realm you've already seen that have a lot of rainbow colors, like Cocoon Lantern that has 4 colors, Guardians of Flutterby Falls that literally has 1 of every color. This is a very colorful realm. Blueprint Swirl is just so easy. It's quite hard to get it to be a +6 card, but it is so easy to make it become a 3, 4, or 5 card in the Resolve. And the fact that it pays for itself, it's a location, so it's hard to remove. Absolutely S tier. You can see why it's a heroic location. Unfortunately, you can't play 2 at the same time. But by having 2 of them in your deck, if somebody does manage to get rid of 1, you've got the other. So powerful. Next is Infirmary. It costs 3. It is a +1 in the Resolve, and as an action, you may dig for a fairy. I'm actually going to put this one. It's kind of very similar to Castle Gates. I am going to just up it to 3 though, to C tier, sorry. And the reason why it's going C tier rather than D tier on Castle Gates is I'm also not a big fan of the fact that it's only a once-off action, because it does mean that Infirmary is only good if you've already had a decent Pixie die. And considering that Infirmary costs 3, you could argue that it's only really worth it if you're digging a fairy that is 4 or more, otherwise it's not really the most worth it. So yeah, it's very, very situational, but compared to Castle Gates, at least it only costs 3, and at least it does start giving you +1 in the resolve. So yeah, for that, it goes into C tier. So then we move to the uncommons. So starting with the actions, we have Blackout. It costs 2, drain 3 shards from all locations with any Achroma. Now this is going straight into the S tier. Like I said, there are not very many cards in this realm that allow you to erase locations. The fact that that drains 3 shards from all locations with any Achroma means that any location we've looked at so far that has 3 shards or less, like for example Blueprint Swirl, like Pixie Prison, there are like Infirmary, and there are a few more that we'll talk about as well, it will get rid of them all. Like, you could literally erase so many locations, and that's just from this realm. If you play Cross Realm, there are loads of locations I can think of that cost 3 shards or less. So yeah, very, very strong card. This is a massive weakness to location-heavy decks. Next is Bounce. Now, Bounce is a very fun card. I'll give it that. It costs 2, and you can return 1 character or location or object of power to the owner's hand. So this is quite useful, but I'm actually going to be putting it down in C tier. The reason why is all it really does is it forces your opponent to spend a couple more shards on the next turn to replay the card that they played before. It doesn't get rid of the character, as in, you know, or location. It doesn't destroy them. It just means they get played next turn. Now, this can have some really positive effects. For example, if you had, let's say someone had a Imp with the Achroma Corruptor. If you bounce the Imp back to the hand, the Achroma Corruptor gets erased because the Imp goes back to the hand, but the object of power then get erased. So you can do some interesting plays, but that's so situational. Whereas anytime that you're just bouncing back a regular character or location, they're going to just be able to play it next turn anyway. Oh no, they've had to spend a few more shards. And on top of that, most of the locations and characters that we've looked at have some really cool abilities that play when you play them. Like, for example, you wouldn't want to bounce back, a Double Trouble, because then they could simply just play Double Trouble and do something else. You wouldn't want to bounce back Carmela Traitorius, because then she could literally just be played again and destroy another character location. So as much as you can have those really fun plays with Bounce, equally, it can actually backfire for you. And overall, all you're really doing is spending 2 of your shards to force them to spend a couple as well. So it's C tier. It's not terrible, but it's not the best. Interesting, but yeah. Next is Defensive Position. It costs 2. All your characters get protection until your next turn. I'm going to put that in A tier, because it is a really... one thing that people struggle with in Achroma is because your characters effectively have Summoning Sickness, because you play them and you can't necessarily attack until your next turn with them. It means that if your opponent has some really strong characters on the board and you have loads of weak ones, you can't play your characters at risk of them being destroyed before you get a chance to attack. But what you could do is you could play 2 characters in one turn and then also play, quite cheaply, Defensive Position, meaning that they cannot be attacked for the next turn because they'll have protection, which means that you have a way of having characters ready for the next attack. Next is Dismantle. This costs 3. You get to erase an object of power and draw a card. I'm personally going to put this down in D tier. The reason why is that there aren't that many objects of power actually in this realm. Like I said, there's only, what do we say, 1? I think there's 6, I think we said, or 5. Achroma Corruptor, Prism Sprayer, Toadstool Cannon, Achroma Bomb, Ballistic Spell. I think that's it, so I think 5. I might have miscounted, I'm sorry if I have. But the point is, there aren't that many objects anyway. So already with Dismantle, the options available to you are quite slim. On top of that, it costs you 3, but apart from Prism Sprayer, all of the objects that we have cost 3 or less anyway. So you're spending 3 shards to only get rid of something that's worth 2 shards to them. Now, yes, it does also allow you to draw a card, but personally, it's in D tier for me. You could argue maybe C tier. You know, for the draw a card, I'll put up to C tier, because drawing a card is nice, but I personally think it's a bit too expensive for what it is, so C tier. And again, I guess you could say, you could also argue for Dismantle that against Cross Realm, against realms like Curdle Hill that has a lot more and more powerful objects, you might argue that would be more powerful, but then we're talking about Cross Realm. With this tier list, I'm mostly considering sticking within the realm. Next then is Excess Paint Pots. This costs you 1. You get to draw the top card of your palette and trade it. I'm putting this in C tier. It's It's not great, if I'm honest. In fact, yeah, I'll put it in C tier. No, D tier. And here's why I'm going in D tier. I can see why it could be a useful card. Let's say you're in a situation where you have some really good cards in your hand, and you desperately need to. You've already traded at the start of your turn. You really need a few extra shards to be able to play, you know, maybe your legendary on this turn. So you could play excess paint pots for 1, and you draw a card, hopefully that will cost more. You then trade that, and great, you gain some shards. You can now play your legendary. But let's just remember that you are forced to trade it. So what if you do excess paint pots and you pick up one of your rares that you really needed for one of your combos? Tough luck, it's gone. And if it's not one of your rares or legendaries, then it's probably only worth 2 or 3 shards, which when you actually take it into account, you've spent 1 on excess paint pots, you're only actually gaining 1 or 2 shards. So for the fact of gaining only 1 or 2 shards, at the risk of you actually trading a card you need, I've just talked myself out of D tier. I'm going F tier. Sorry, excess paint pots. Next is Full Palette. I'm going to chuck Full Palette right into the S tier. There we go. Double row for the S tier now. It's a fantastic action. It costs you 2 and you splat 6. So it does. You do need to have another character on your board, but essentially it's a free 4 shards. No one's going to complain at getting 4 free shards. Can't complain. Next then is Snuff Out. Snuff Out is a action where as an action, it costs 2, you get to squish 2, which means that you give a character -2. I'm going to put that into, I mean, it very much depends on what build you're going for, I guess. I'll go C tier. It's a good way of getting 2 quick minus, you know, that might, as the name suggests with Snuff Out, you're probably going to use Snuff Out to literally kill your opponent that turn. You know, you've already done your resolution. You might then just spend that to do the last killing blow. But it's very situational. Yeah, C tier will do. C tier. Yeah, I guess you could say B tier, but I'm going C. And then we come on to the uncommon characters. So first we've got Chroma Worm. Yeah, and I'm going to go D tier because he could be good if you're able to give him an object of power. So he's not terrible. But yeah, the reason I'm putting him in D tier is that, let's say you play him so that on your next turn, you can block 1. Your opponent is going to get an attack phase before their resolve phase anyway. And if they even have 1 character on the board, they could easily just target your Chroma Worm and defeat it. And the only card we've got in this entire realm that could stop that is Defensive Position for protection, or Guardians of Flutterby Falls, which you could use to defend your Chroma Worm. If you haven't played Defensive Position or you haven't got Guardians out, then there's nothing you can do to stop Chroma Worm being destroyed. So for that, D tier. Like, he's literally 1 block, but they'll get rid of it before you actually get a chance to block. Next is Daydrifter. It costs 1, and action is gain 1. Now, I'm going to put this in B tier. I wouldn't say A tier or S tier because, yes, okay, it does pay for itself. It pays for itself there and then. It's literally a free card to play. It costs 1, but you gain 1 straight away. So you could argue, well, why is that not S tier? It's a free card. But the issue is, once you've played it, it's literally useless. It's a 1-cost character. What's that going to do for you? So I'm going to put it in B tier, and here's why. Because you want to combine it with your Role Reversal. These two are literally the perfect combo. Remember, Role Reversal is the card where you can swap a character with another character. So what you could do is play Daydrifter. It costs you literally nothing. And once it's been played, it's practically useless. Then use Role Reversal to trade the Daydrifter for your opponent's character, maybe King Craven with an Achroma Corruptor, and suddenly it's an incredible trade. So B tier. Not a bad card because it's free, but it relies on you having something else like Role Reversal to really get the most out of it. Next is Draco. Cost 2, +2. I'm going to put him straight up to A tier. The fact that he is a character, one of the only characters actually in this entire realm that pays for himself in the same turn. Even if Dracon gets killed on the next turn, you've lost no shards. If Dracon does manage to survive a second turn, you've gained 2 shards. And, you know, it's profit. It's all profit. Next, then, is Funguar. Now, you all know what I'm going to say. Funguar goes straight up to S tier. For those that don't know, and those aren't in the Achroma community Discord, Funguar is our king and savior. He is our favorite card. He is S tier every day of the week. And as much as I would like to leave him up there, I am going to move him. And that is because I do want to try and stay consistent with my tier lists. And as much as I do for the meme, want to throw him right up into S tier, I am actually going to place him where I think he should be in terms of his actual card value. If we were doing a tier list on who is the best character of just looks and who we love, of course he'd be an S++. But based on his actual abilities, Fungwa is a 2-cost card, nothing in the resolve, and is poisonous. So very similar to Rapid Dog in the Curdle Hill, but the difference is at least Rapid Dog gets a steal. I'm actually going to put Fungwa down in B tier because he is good, but he's situational. What I mean by that is not only do you have to be able to, because he has the summoning sickness, you have to be able to play him and keep him alive to be able to then attack on the next turn to attack, you know, someone that you want to destroy. And he's a kind of a once-off use because of the poisonous. Unless you suddenly attach an Achroma Corrupted to him, or, you know, a Prism Sprayer, then he becomes really powerful. But yeah, just by himself, he is good, but situational. Unfortunately, Fungwa, you're going B tier. But just because I like him, he can go to the top of B tier. Next then is Ravaged Elite. It is a 2-cost pixie with -1 in the resolve and squish 1. I'm going to put them into the... Oh, what do we think? I'm going to put them into C tier. The fact that he only costs 2 and you effectively get a -2. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put him in A tier. No, B tier. And I'm going to put him in B tier. And this is the reason why. He is good, but only if you're playing an Achroma style deck. So if you're playing an Achroma deck where you're going for minuses, then he's great. Cost 2 to essentially get 2- is very cost effective, but it does rely on you having another character or location that you can squish. And on top of that, he otherwise gains you little to no value on the basis that he's only a 2-cost character and has no way of gaining anything. Next then is the Ravaged 1. Cost 1, action, squish 1. I'm also going to put him in B tier. For the same sort of reason. He's kind of like a similar... Actually, I'll go B tier. Costs 1 to -1. It's fine. I'm pretty certain we had one of those cards earlier that was cost 1 to -1. And we put them around there as well. But yeah, I'm fine with B tier for them. And then lastly for the characters is Trainee Painter. Costs 1, +1, splat 1 as an action. I am absolutely going to put him up to A tier. The fact that he pays for himself in 1 turn means that, well, he more than pays for himself. So you put him down, as long as you do have one other character or location on your board, you're going to basically get 2 back. So you gain 1 from playing him. And on top of that, he synergizes really well with quite a lot of other cards. Well, mainly the painters, but even still, by himself, he's a good card, but he has the potential to help out others. So, you know, he stacks quite well with, you know, for example, Weather. He stacks well with Squad Leader. So yes, I'm going to put him in A tier. So now we move on to the uncommon locations. So Achroma Factory costs 2, and Squish is each pixie on your canvas. The fact it only costs 2 is quite nice and strong, but it's going in B tier because it still does rely on you having many pixies out on your canvas. Otherwise, I like it. Next is Cog's Village. It costs 1 and you gain 1. As most of you know from my previous other videos of tier lists, any cards that pay for themselves on the same turn, especially ones that are locations like Blueberry Grove that are much harder to get rid of, is going in A tier. Because why would you not want something that is a constant supply of shards? Even if it's only +1 each turn, it pays for itself in its first turn, and unless your opponent has something like Blackout to suddenly remove all your locations, chances are it's not getting removed and it's going to pay for itself over and over and over again. Next is Corrupted Groves. It costs 3, and the shard value of cards whilst in the player's hand is reduced by black. Now, for the same reason that I put these ones, I'm going to put it into C tier. The fact that it costs 3 to reduce 1... Actually, I'm going to go D tier. Oh, I might even go F, to be honest. No, I'm going to go C tier for a slightly different reason. So with things like Splat Teacher, Cornelius, Matron, the other ones, those have all been Chroma. And most of the time, when you play a Chroma-based deck, you normally have a decent surplus of shards. So it doesn't really matter that much if you don't reduce them. But as we've spoken about, in Achroma decks, you more often than not really struggle to keep your shard count high. So by having something like Corrupted Groves that allows you to reduce the cost by 1, actually is much stronger than some of the other cards. So I was tempted to put it down in D or F because it doesn't actually, it's not a +1. It doesn't give you anything in Resolve. I'm going to leave it in C tier rather than D tier because of the fact that for Achroma decks, it's stronger than some of these other ones. Next is Lava Fountain. That's going to go down in D tier. Again, same situations. It costs 3. It'll take 3 turns to pay itself back. And yes, it reduces the value of players' cards by 1 red. But again, like I said, it's for everybody. I'm repeating myself quite a lot here. Next is Lost Property. This is a 3-cost card. It's a block 1. And as an action, you get to find an object of power. Personally, I'm also putting that in D tier because 3 cost for getting nothing back in the Resolve is not very good. 1 block is quite measly, considering that a lot of the Achroma cards have a lot of steal and minus in this realm. So only 1 block is not really going to do much. And finding an object of power, yeah, that's a really strong thing. But as we've discussed, there are not that many objects of power in these decks, especially as some of the best ones are rares, so you're only going to have 1 of them. So unless you get Lost Property really early to be able to get your Achroma Corruptor out early, for the most part, I've had it before where I've played Lost Property midway through my game, looked through my deck only to find that I've got no more objects left. And I was like, well, great, that's now useless to me. So yeah, D tier. Next then is Soaking Stone. This costs 2 and steals 1. I'm going to put this in... I'm going to do a B tier. It's not quite A tier because it's going to take at least 2 turns to pay itself back. But the fact that actually in 2 turns it will have done, and then we'll continue to get you more. And it's the fact it's a steal, so it is going to be quite offensive as well. Yeah, B tier is nice for that. Water Fountain is going to go into D tier, same as Lava Fountain. It's exactly the same carbon copy of the card. If I put them literally like this, they look really cool together. But instead of being red, it is dark blue. But same situation, 3 cost for 1, 3 turns to pay itself back. And again, I'm not too happy with those abilities. And then lastly, we come to the uncommon objects of power. The first one is Achroma Bomb. It costs 2. It's a -1 in the Resolve and allows you to squish 1. I'm going to put that into B tier for the same reason that I put some of these other Achroma ones in there. It's nice that for only costing 2, you can effectively -2 straight away. But once you've done that action, it really is quite a weak object. A 2-cost object isn't going to do you much help. We've then got Toadstool Cannon, which is a 2-cost block 2. Now this one I'm actually going to put up into A tier. Yeah, I'm going to go A tier because it is, apart from Guardians of Flutterby Falls, it is the second best card for block in this realm. There's not very much block in this realm at all. You've got Guardians, which is a block 4, Chrome Worm, that is a terrible block 1, Lost Property, that's not a very good block 1. So Total Cannon is your only real chance to get some block out. So if you put Total Cannon on something like Copper Joss, who cannot be attacked, you then have a permanent 2 block out. So yeah, I'm putting it up in A tier. Any object is a potentially good object, but the fact that it's a block 2 and it's one of the only block cards in this realm, it's going into A tier. If there were many other block cards in this realm, then I probably would have moved it down. And then last but not least, we have Ballistics Belt. It is a 2-cost card. It's a +1 and it's a splat 1. I'm also going to put this into the A tier for Objects of Power because it pays for itself in 1 turn. The fact that provided you got another character on your turn, another character or location on your canvas, it pays for itself. And then on top of that, it's just a simple, a good way of adding a few extra points onto your character. And there we have it. There is my Fall of Flutterby tier list. Just to repeat myself, this is designed to help people with deck building. So if you are now looking to deck build in the Fall of Flutterby, I would recommend you try and fit in as many of those S tier cards as you can, as well as many of the A's and B's. Avoid the C's, D's and F's. Take into consideration when you do this, that some of those cards in the lower tiers do get a little bit better when you synergize them with certain decks. However, overall, the more of the cards you can get from the top, in my opinion, you will have stronger overall decks. As always, I would love your opinions in the comments and in the Achroma Discord. If you'd like to have a go at this tier list yourself, there will be a link below in the description. To see my other Achroma videos, then make sure you click on the playlist that is in the description. We've got a lot of shorts as well for new players learning. I've been Foulplay Gaming, and we'll do another one of these tier lists when the new realm comes out later in the year. Thank you very much for watching. Stay wholesome.